Let's talk about the hardest part of doing first ascents, and that is not hiking the canyons again and again, day after day, looking for new potential. And it's not carrying the heavy loads out there, and it's not risking the death choss that you might pull down on yourself or your rope or even your belayer. It's not the exhaustion of cleaning choss and dust and dirt for days. It's just like the annoyance of first ascent credit and naming rights. I don't get it. So here in the US, it's pretty much whoever climbs the route first, free, gets to name the route, which, totally makes sense in a lot of situations. And I like that, ground up first ascents, obviously. But if somebody's been working on a route and they're currently really invested in it and, they're destined to do it and they're in the process of this discovery, it's just kind of lame when somebody walks up and they're like, oh yeah, well, let me give this a try. Let me jump in, and then they send it and they start talking about what they're going to name it. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to name this Pink Fairy Farts. And you're like, wow, I just spent like 3 months dreaming about this route and like 3 weeks trying to make it safe and climbable. Now I got it sparkling clean. The next person who just happened to stumble upon it is like, this is mine. You're probably naturally going to be saying like, well, I'm only saying this because of my ego, which is true. I do have an ego and I'm not going to hide that, right? Why? Because I'm a human. And looking at a possible route, it's kind of chossy. I'll pass on it. I'll keep hiking. And let's be real, egos aren't always negative. Sometimes ego can push you to achieve things, right? Achieve great things. Because we humans, let's be real, we crave validation for our hard work. We do something good at work and we hope that our boss compliments it and says, good job, proud of you, right? Well, we do well in our relationship and we want our spouse or partner to say, thanks for doing that thing that you did. It was great. So why would it be any different? And why would it be so negative for a first ascensionist after spending lots and lots of time preparing a route, want to finish the process and have some credit? Ironically, the people who tend to scream the loudest about this is just your negative ego, for some reason tend to be the exact same people who are like, I'm going to swoop your proj and I'm going to get my name in the book and I'm going to name the route. And I'm like, whoa, what about that ego? Does that not count? So really, that over the many years I've been doing this, it's kind of led me to realize that usually the people who are most excited to swoop routes and the people who are most ready to scream about the route developer's ego tend to be the people who aren't contributing and the people who just want the credit without putting in that work. Because first ascents are a lot of work, a lot of hiking. And I haven't found anything today, but that's okay. It's a lot of work and you don't always win. Oh, and yes, I know this is all public property, so we have the right, of course, to swoop in on any first ascents or anything like that. We're just talking about what makes people feel happy and appreciated. And that's what's really important. So yeah, if somebody else says, well, I'm looking at that route and I really want to try to see if I can clean and FA that thing, I'm going to be like, cool, yeah, you do that. And I'm just going to step back, go find something else. Because if somebody wants to do work, I'm going to respect that and be like, thanks for doing the work. Let me just step back and let you enjoy the process, rather than trying to interject and, steal little bits of credit, which is not cool. So we run into this problem where even if we're out climbing with our friends and, somebody spent a lot of work on a route to prepare it for us, we're like, we don't really want our friends to hop on it because we want to finish the process, and we want the full credit from beginning to end. We don't want somebody coming in and, taking the last leg of the relay and winning and getting their name on everything. Because let's be real, nobody's like, oh yeah, Joe's route over there, the guy that spent 3 weeks cleaning the route. They're like, Bobby's route, the guy who just walked up and sent it because it was sparkling and ready to go. And it's just like, oh, right? And that hurts the ego, right? When, we could all be better. Me admitting that to you is admitting that at times I have a fragile ego. Let's be real. But again, ego is kind of something that pushes us humans to achieve. Ego can be healthy sometimes. Too much ego can be damaging emotionally to ourselves and others. We have to find that balance. So what tends to happen when somebody has finished preparing a route and now they're ready to give it the red point tries is, they try to keep it secret and not let anybody know other than one trusted person who promises not to hop on the route. Right. And then you're struggling to find belayers because you're like, hey, come out here and I'm just going to do this thing and you're just going to support me. And that's kind of lame. So you're like, okay, well, you can hop on the route, but just don't send it. This is so common. We've all said or felt this plenty of times if you're a route developer. And that feels dirty. I don't like it. Because then what is the other person there for? So maybe you might say, okay, yeah, hop on it and have fun. But then you decide not to tell them all the beta and you don't tell them that there's a hidden jug around the corner. And then they fall and you're like, oh, bummer, you fell. I'm so sorry. Yes. Thank you. And then you hop on, you get your first ascent, you get to name it, you get the credit. And then you're like, you'll get it next time. Oh yeah, by the way, there's a jug. It's that's so dirty and so lame. But that is what the ethic is here in the US is the person who climbs it first gets the credit, and you kind of get this secondary credit if you're lucky of, the person who developed the route gets, their little name and they're bolted by. And there's connotations that are weird with that. Sometimes people are like, oh yeah, that was bolted by Joe, but yeah, I guess he couldn't send it, so Bobby sent it. And it's like, why did you make that up? You just invented that. And I hear that all the time, right? And it's just because it says bolted by this person, sent by that person, right? So there's weird things that people do. So my closest friends and I, we came up with a solution, which is screw that ethic. It creates division and negativity. And we're pretty much like, whoever found the route, put in all the work to develop it. If they're destined to send this thing, no question, and they're actively working on it, one person hops on it first and they send it, and great, we can feel happy for them. And then, we hop on it next and then we send it. And we don't have to be like, dang, they swooped it, now they get all the credit. My closest friends and I, we're just like, no, it's your route, it's your FA. Why does it matter if I did it at 9 a.m. and you did it at 10 a.m.? I mean, what's that about, right? Now, granted, if somebody sends it and then takes the other person 6 months because they just can't do it, need to relinquish the FFA, the first free ascent, and that's logical. That makes total sense. I don't want to swoop that credit from my friend. If my friend put in that work, that's their credit. I want them to have that credit because they earned it. So I was just in South Africa and I got to develop some routes with a truly incredible person named Ebert Nell. And I think he might have transcended humanity because he develops the routes and then he doesn't want the FA. He just develops them and then has somebody else lead them first and then they name them. And what I'll say to that is he is a much better human than myself. It's amazing. I don't know how he does it. Maybe it's because he's the only one that develops routes there. So it's just, I don't know. But, some people have that talent of, absolute humility. But most of us like a bit of a pat on the back for the hard work we do. And a common response to all of this is, well, you shouldn't be developing routes for credit. You should be developing them for yourself. And I agree with that. The problem I see with that, though, is that I find that the people who develop routes for themselves rather than trying to develop for, the masses. Develop routes that are like chossy or run out or dirty, and they don't put this like care and love into the route that it deserves, that the people who climb afterwards deserve. So I think that if you are bolting with a bit of a public ego, your routes are going to be better because you're going to need them to be better. Of course, then you could be bolting with a selfish ego and say, my routes are perfect. They're great. They're not chossy. And it turns out they're like total junk shows. So ego goes many ways, right? And we can't always guess what type of ego somebody has based on first appearance. So those are my views on first ascent naming and those ethics. It's kind of crazy stuff, but I'm gonna keep on walking this canyon and seeing if I find anything else that might be fun, not just for me to climb, but for all you to climb. So far I haven't found it today, but that's okay. Let me share a story with you that has haunted me since 2016, and it's about this route behind me. It is an incredible 5-pitch route to the rim, and it was actually the first route I ever climbed in this amazing canyon. And I went climbing with someone who I think was trying to, somewhat with permission, kind of swoop the FA from the team that established the route. And this person was very adamant about getting this first ascent. This person is actually very well known in the community for his or her their hard, scary trad climbing. So I was really excited to learn. I was pretty new to the desert. I'd only been here like 9 days at that point. And so I'm like, I'm gonna learn so much from this professional climber, who's known for hard finger cracks and all this stuff. And, and so I get here and this person is like, okay, I need you to go rig up the route and tell me what all the gear is so that I can get the FA. And I'm like, oh, that's peculiar. And I was like, oh, you don't know what the gear is? And this person was like, no, I have no idea. So I just need you to go up there. And I was like, okay. So it's a 512. I didn't really know anything at the time. Didn't know what the gear was because all the cracks are kind of angled so you can't quite see into them. So I brought this massive rack and I was on site. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I feel so excited, and then I get near the top and this person is like, hey, remember to jump off so that you don't send it. And I'm like, oh, right. I was having fun right now, I guess. Okay. So there's like the last little bit of like 5/8 hand crack to the anchor, and I plugged in a cam and was like, take, and I like sat in the cam, and then I like went back to like 2 moves of easy to the anchor, and was like, in my mind, I'm like, cool, I sent it, and I'm proud of that, right? I count that as a personal send, but I did not want at all to count that towards like the send of the route. It's not my route. I just showed up and just happened to be somebody who climbed it. It's not my route. I do not want my name on it. I did not earn it, which is fair. But then this person kept talking about how like, well, better luck, you'll get it next time. And I'm like, what the fuck? They're trying to like downplay what I did so that it wouldn't be that I could have the possibility of claiming credit, which I did not want. So then I had to top rope the route afterwards to figure out the more ideal gear placement. So I'm top roping and figuring out exactly the ideal gear, which side of the harness goes on. I'm having to like put tick marks on the crack so that it would be obvious where the gear goes. And then I belayed this person on a top rope lap, and then I belayed the red point, which was, it was close. It was very close. It was very exciting. It was very energetic. So I lowered this person down to the ground, many congratulations. And then they were like, after, they get the FA, of course, like, well, do you want to try again and see if you can send it? And I'm thinking in my head, like, I already sent it. I like hung on a cam at like 1 move of 5/8 to the anchor. Like, I'm fine. And they were like, no, you have to send it. You have to do it. So I'm like, Sure, whatever. So then I, so then I climb up. I get partway through the crux, and I whip, and I whip on the first piece of gear that you can place like from the ground, and there's this like little pedestal that's like a foot off the start of the route, and rather than doing this like class 1 step down to the ground and then step back up, I just stayed on top of this pedestal 1 foot above the ground and then took it to the top. And I get down to the ground, and this person said, well, better luck next time. I think just a little bit more training should get you there. And I and my buddy were like, huh? Anyway, I guess that last part of the story isn't entirely necessary to to the topic at hand, but it does tell you more about how this story from 2016 still haunts me. But anyway, you can see illustrated in this story this desire to be first at the detriment of others is really lame. It's not fun. I mean, that day was not at all fun. I never climbed with this person ever again. And then I went from, kind of idolizing this person to kind of being repulsed anytime I saw any content from them, because it was just such a terrible experience. So what if people could have their credit as credit is due, but we are nicer to our friends and use a bit more like nuance rather than black and white? Maybe.